So I want to explore how your motivation changed over time. So you went to university. What happens next?
The pressure that I would say not just me, but many of my classmates had been through to get there was intense. So it was almost like a fuse, sort of the gasket had blown off a pressure cooker. You get there and you feel you've made it in life, only to realize that you may have been the smartest in schools, wherever you were. And you get to this place, and then the target almost became to be average, because average was actually good enough. So I wouldn't say I was a motivated student while I was at university. My target was to be in the upper half of the class, and I managed that in an extremely efficient manner.
So what was your dream at that time?
It's a good one. Good question. I would often grapple with, what do I really want to be doing? Because there was a side of me that wanted to do something good for India. And I wouldn't call myself an irrational patriot. It would be nice to do something there, but I wanted to have money. So it was a tricky one. So I took the easier option, which was to go to business school in India and look for a company which potentially would post me overseas over time. So I joined Bank of America as my first job after business school.
So at that time, your motivation was financial.
It was financial. So I wanted a better life than I think we had had. It was okay, but I had seen what people could do if they had money. I hadn't seen too many people with money, but it was one of those where I would say by the time I got to university, I was a bit more aware. There were students there who were from wealthy backgrounds. Not too many. Most people were regular middle class, but there were a few. So money had become a motivator then.
So how did you go from there to building a business?
So my first salary was higher than my dad's salary, who'd been working for 27 years. He was plant manager of a big cement company. So in that sense, I was relatively well off for a 23-year-old, 22, 23-year-old. However, I think my salary was £1,500 a year at today's exchange rate. Did I feel like I had arrived in life? No, definitely not. Around the same time was the internet boom was taking place in the US. So while I did not know what salaries and so on my friends were earning, many of them were millionaires on paper because I had stock of companies that was doing phenomenally well. So for me, one of the things that then I had in my mind was to try and join a startup, which is what most of my friends had done. They had joined startups and they had shares in a bunch of companies, which had made them ridiculously wealthy. So it was more of how to join a startup. So I took, again, an easier option, but a more achievable option was to join a large company, which was a startup in India. So I was the seventh professional to join British Gas in India that had just set up its operations. My salary more than doubled from where I was at Bank of America. So the pay was also good. And I thought I had the optionality of being part of an early member of a team, which was going to do lots of stuff in a large country with the comfort knowing that they wouldn't run out of money because it was part of a big company.
Sounds very well thought through.
So I took that. My philosophy in life is always, if the worst case option is not too bad, I'm happy to take those chances. I was still keen on joining a startup, which by then it had become clear to me had to be in the US. But I couldn't get, as an Indian passport holder living in India, there was no way I could get to the US on an employment visa. It was just not a possibility. So I started to look for jobs outside the country to figure out a way to eventually get to the US. And 2 months later, after having found a way to get a visa to get to the Dominican Republic, I found myself in the Dominican Republic having joined this startup, which was 20 people working out of a free zone in Santo Domingo with 3 business verticals. And the 3 verticals being e-commerce, payment processing, and online gaming gambling. And all 3 were sort of on the cards at that point in time. So I was there running the operation in the Dominican Republic, but it was a small group. It was a small startup. I was 27. I think there were a couple of people in the team who were slightly older, sort of early 30s. The rest were all, as I called them, overgrown babies. They were part-time college students, not particularly professional. So it was an interesting setup that I moved to. But that was how I got to my startup. That startup ended up becoming a large company with a bunch of things that we did.
Just 5 years later, right?
Yes. So
how did that happen?
We had software that we would sell to other people wanting to get into online casinos. We also had a couple of our own sites. Now, this is me having moved from India, never having set foot in a casino, never having. I'd played cards as a child, but I never enjoyed playing cards. Till date, I don't know the basic hand rankings of poker. I couldn't play a game of poker to save my life. But I found myself in this business where the one line of business with promise was software for online casinos. And so we tried figuring out the business and very quickly realized that people were betting against the house, where we had a month before I had moved to the Dominican Republic, had a customer who had exploited a bug. So I think he had cashed out over $1 million.
Oh, wow.
And given that it was our fault in our software, we ended up paying him. But it was one of those things which for me was just a high risk thing, which we shouldn't have been in. And somebody happened to show me a poker site, which looked like a risk-free way of doing business or building a business. When I first saw this poker site, I said, this is interesting. This is like an exchange where you get people to come in, they play with each other, they transact with each other, you're facilitating transactions. And as long as there are enough people, you're just collecting a commission, which after the loss that the company had seemed like a very sensible way forward.
Yeah.
So we ended up launching a poker site, which was developed by programmers sitting in India, none of whom knew how to play poker. They'd have books on shelves with rules of poker.
Yeah.
It sounds funny, and I think it was funny and shocking for people.
I love the simplicity.
So that was our inspiration to get in. By the time we launched our poker software, there would have been 10, 15 other sites that had already launched. And I think most people had been inspired by Paradise Poker. I think it was a number of things that happened to go our way that actually led us to becoming the largest poker site in the world.
According to public records, at the time the company went public, your personal net worth was $1.6 billion.
No, so that's incorrect because in the public records, it's easy to calculate. It was not 1.6. After we went public and the stock hit a high, it had gone up to somewhere like over 1.
Yeah.
I think less than 1.6, but somewhere over 1.
How did that feel?
I have never counted paper money as money. The billion plus whatever didn't really mean anything. I would say I had more money by the time we went public. That going public did not really change the way we lived. It was purely being rich before to being publicly rich. I think that was a big change.
Did you finally feel you arrived financially?
So I still remember when I had the first $1 million in the bank. So that was a big deal. And if we go back just a few years before that, I tell my wife, and half in jest, I said, if I have sort of 30, 40 million rupees, I'd build a hospital, you work, I will sit and play video games. And so that was a very modest ambition. We ran through the sort of 10 million rupees to $1 million to then many tens of millions of dollars. And at that point in time, I was so busy that the money did not really change how we lived, except that ended up buying three apartments when we just moved to Gibraltar because I knew I could just afford it. I bought properties without looking. So the money gave me the ability to buy properties, and I'm not a property lover.
So your definition of financial success was linked to properties you could buy.
I think that was a change that happened with financial success. Financial success was knowing that I had the freedom and the ability to buy properties.
So, Vikrant, you're notoriously private. In fact, you told me that this is your first podcast interview, and I'm very grateful, very flattered that you chose this one to be your first one. So, when Party Gaming went public, it was a very loud IPO. It was the largest internet company that went public ever by that time on London Stock Exchange. How did that affect your relationship with other people?
So I would say I'm not notoriously private. I'm very open in person. But I think I was scarred by the publicity we got. 32 years old, two young kids at that point in time, one literally a newborn, 3 months old. We had paparazzi type. We had photographers with long lenses. One chap who had parked outside our apartment building in Gibraltar. And I had been very much in the public domain before that. So I had done interviews with a bunch of newspapers, even pre-IPO and post-IPO. But I think it was that one sort of long lens photographer in Gibraltar who pressed on the buzzer. We didn't want the person coming in. It sort of freaked me out, and I said, enough, I don't want to be in the press at all. My friends, I had been warned by me, or had prepped them in the months leading up to the IPO that we were going to go public and it was going to be big. But I don't think anybody really understood how big.
What was the company's valuation at the time?
When we went public, it was £4 billion, $8 billion. The exchange rate was 2 to 1 then. So yeah.
That's a huge number. I'm sure it affected people a lot.
Close to $1 billion top line, close to a $500 million bottom line business when we IPO'd. So it wasn't sort of huge PE multiples and so on. So it was a big IPO. So getting my friends ready was something I had started to do pre-IPO. The rest of the people didn't really matter. I've moved around so many places over the years that I don't have too much contact with many of the people except my friends. And my friends know me to be the same person.
But prepping them worked.
Prepping them worked, but there is still a difference between prepping a person and seeing the effects of the money or what that money can buy. So till date, I'm conscious when people come to my house, when I've invited friends who have not been to my place before, to be ready for the fact that I live in a big house and I don't want photos posted on any social medias. Outside of my surroundings, my house, I'm still pretty much a similar person. Yes, it's not the same. I can afford to spend money on many things that many of my friends, close friends from university, for example, can't. But they've all done well. Most of them have done reasonably well, so it's fine.
So what was that moment when you felt, okay, financially, I'm set for life?
So I'd say pre-IPO, we were already, I felt very comfortable, set for life. And my net worth multiplied. As I say net worth, bank balances multiplied post-IPO. But they were already meaningful enough pre-IPO for me to have felt comfortable for life.
How did that change the way you thought about what you wanted?
I don't think it changed anything at all at that point in time because I was too busy working. So it was only in 2005, post-IPO, that we had the luxury of some time and a much larger bank balance to even start to enjoy the money even slightly, but still not sort of think about what I wanted to do with the money. I started to deeply think about post 2006, where I had exited the business. And that was, I think it was a start of a long journey which still continues.
When you suddenly had the luxury of both time and money, how did that feel?
Honestly, at that point in time, it was miserable. Because we had So I had the money. The money hadn't changed. Uh, I didn't know what to do with the time. And I had suddenly come into possession of a lot of time. I was not used to time. I was used to a very large team and working crazy hours and spending whatever little time I had with the kids. But also that wasn't much, while I still tried to make the maximum I could for the kids. But when I stepped down, it was a rough separation, and I went from being super busy to all of a sudden feeling like I had lost control of my child, because the company had been, and I'd spent more time on the business than on my children till then. I, that point in time, felt like you take a child that's been taken care of properly, who's being given to somebody who's likely to abuse it. So for me, it was more of I stepped down and I shut myself completely from the business, to the point when people ask me today as to how the business is, I mean, where the company is, I don't know if it's public or private. I don't know who owns it. I literally, when I stepped down, there were no Google alerts set for the business. So that was, I didn't want to know anything that was happening. I was probably protecting myself by not wanting to know what was happening. And I said, I don't want to see my child being abused. I don't even want to know. I would see people, but I was very clear that I did not want to talk about the company. I didn't want to know anything about what was going on in the business.
That was quite a lot of years ago. Is it still the case?
Most of the old guard have left. So I'm still friends with my people. I had a disagreement with one of my business partners at that point in time. She and I are very good friends now. So that was one rough year. So that separation, when I had the luxury of time and the financial stability. Yes, financial stability, nothing had changed, but that time was not welcome time. It wasn't time that I had planned for or was looking forward to. When it happened because of circumstances. So it wasn't fun.
How was your sense of identity affected by that exit?
That's a good question. Was my sense of identity affected at all?
Okay.
I think I went from being a person who had built a very successful business. We had outsmarted all our competitors and outgrown all our competitors to become larger than the rest put together. There was a period where I shut all advertising because we couldn't handle the customers we were driving onto the platform. It felt nice. So that gave, especially then. So now when I think about it, it's many, many years ago. But at that point in time, it gave a particular kick. However, I'm not sure I take my identity from that. So as an individual, I don't think I really changed too much. I'm sure some people will disagree, but at my core, I think I'm very much the person I was when I was 20 years old. Yeah, I do have a lot of money. I totally appreciate that. I understand that, and it gives me a lot of freedom to do a whole bunch of things. And the fact that I have no stress whatsoever on the money side, it's hugely liberating.
What about the loss of structure? You said you had hundreds of employees and then you had nobody around you. How did that feel?
At that point in time, I didn't know the word. Today, I would say it was depressing. So I probably, if I had gotten myself checked then, I would have been depressed at that point in time. So I went from having a very large number, a team of people that was dependent on me, that I ran. So I shouldn't say the team was dependent on me, but that I oversaw, to suddenly just having one person who reported to me, and that was somebody who's worked with me now for many, many years, my executive assistant, from an office to not having an office, working from home. And I say working, I wasn't really working. So it wasn't working from home. It was more of being responsible for a lot of money that had come into my bank accounts, which was at that point in time being run by various bankers. So it was more an obligation to just sort of oversee how that was deployed, as opposed to making interesting decisions on an operating business to me. So that's far more interesting than looking at a portfolio which was deployed into a bunch of funds.
Would you say you were bored? On top of being miserable and depressed?
Yes, it was quite boring.
So did you regret exiting the business?
If I had to go back in time, would we go through the process again? I'd advise people to go through it, but be better prepared for it. Because as I said, being publicly rich is not that easy. It's easier to be privately rich. But it was a good experience. So I would highly recommend going through it if it's meaningful. My exit from the business happened later, which was when I stepped down from the business. So where I mentally and sort of operationally exited the business. That was not, as I said, I could have stayed on in the business and be super stressed. Then I would have had a heart attack in 2 more years. So do I regret that? Not at all. So it was absolutely the right thing I did at that point in time.